People who are no longer bound by NDAs, what are some surprising secrets that you can expose? Story 1. In a tech support role, one manager used to boast his team's average call times were the lowest in the company. While average call times were in the 12 to 17-minute range, his team was constantly under 10 minutes. His team was awarded multiple times, and his strategy was adopted company-wide to all customer service and technical support teams, including our internal IT teams. That strategy was under a strict NDA, as we did not want to allow competitors to emulate it. When our call center would go bid on contracts, it became an awesome metric. Our customer satisfaction scores are on par, but we have call times 20 to 30% lower than our competitors. The dirty secret of the NDA that I was not allowed to disclose? Their big method? Just hang up on people, straight up. Find a way to say, okay, go ahead and do that and call back if it doesn't fix it. Then hang up. Don't wait for confirmation. Okay, so reboot your PC and your problem should be solved. Thanks for calling. Click. Eventually, they came out with more useful metrics that tracked things like first call resolution, which absolutely shredded this company, and they went out of business a year or two later. Story 2. Manipulation of data to give false impressions of reliability was something I saw quite blatantly utilized with little repercussions. My company was struggling to meet on-time delivery schedules, and for numerous years was as embarrassingly low as 40%. A new manager comes in, and within months we are now boasting an on-time delivery rate of a brilliant 95%. Turns out all he did was change what constituted an on-time delivery. Each time we knew a product would be late, we'd notify the customer of the delay and ask them to confirm they still wanted the order. If they still wanted the product, the on-time delivery would be recorded against the new expected date as opposed to the original promised date. Company literature was being sent out boasting of our 95% on-time delivery, now amongst the highest in the industry, when in fact we were by that point meeting less than 30% of initial delivery schedule targets. It was so simple that I'm sure numerous companies are getting away with such underhand tricks. Story 3. About 20 years ago, I signed an NDA with a very large record company regarding their attempts to get into selling their catalog online, streaming sales, etc. It was a minefield because they were still wary of pissing off high street retailers, and that's where the charts came from. These attempts were frustrated by their top-level corporate guys. One week, they all went to a What is an MP3 conference in Buenos Aires to get them up to speed. The thing is, they spent so much time partying, the only talk which seemed to stick was the scare tactics about how teens could scrape MP3s from the web, and they could be copied and redistributed easily. When they came back, every item in the catalog was ordered to be scrubbed from the web. No 30-second previews, nothing should be audible, not a hint of audio. Lock it all down, put all the tapes in a chest, and seal it with concrete at the bottom of the sea. That's going to make everyone go back to CDs, good old profitable CDs. Story 4. I briefly worked at a university in South Florida in the late 90s and early 2000s. I was chosen to be on an academic integrity team, basically reviewing claims of plagiarism and cheating, and deciding between the 5 of us whether it is valid or not. We were made to sign NDAs when we accepted the invite to be a part of the team. There were 3 instances where an employee that was taking classes there clearly cheated, and the issue was brought to our attention. On those 3 times, the cheating was blatant. All 3 times we were told to let it go, as it would look bad for the university to have it get out. I'm not sure if this is common for other universities, but at the time, I was under the impression that it was common practice everywhere. It was ultimately one of the main reasons I ended up quitting. I was and still am disgusted by it. Story 5. In Prince George's County, Maryland, county transit bus drivers are instructed following an accident they are not to speak to anyone until a supervisor arrives on the scene. An approved method for not talking, especially to other drivers involved, is to feign injury. There's actually money allotted to pay the fines related to wasting 911 and emergency resources, because analysts determined it was cheaper than costs associated with drivers accidentally admitting fault. There's also an entire audit and analysis team related to accidents because of the sheer volume of people who falsely claim to be on a bus during an accident. Story 6. IT consultant of many, many winters. The most critical applications in banking, insurance, and finance run on badly outdated machines held together by duct tape, prayers, and compressed dust, standing in dark, wet corners in mostly forgotten basements. Also, those systems are written in the most obscure and long-dead programming languages, or even directly in assembler for a certain chipset, written by code wizards in their own idiosyncratic dialects, who are now long retired or even dead. Backup systems are mostly non-existent, or the data tapes are worn down to basically transparent tape. Even had a case around 2020 where a cleaning tape from '99 was still in the bay due to the robot being faulty. If a cleaner or janitor pulls the wrong plug to find an outlet for their vacuum, there is a decent chance that whole branches or even institutions begin to crumble. Most of those systems will also never be updated due to their legacy status, aka, we don't know what this is doing or even how it is doing what it is doing, but it is a critical part of our whole infrastructure and nobody dares to touch it, but we will never invest the necessary sums to analyze those systems, write documentation, or even replace them. Story 7. Worked in technical customer support for an IT/hardware company. We were sold a bad batch of chips from a supplier. The chips caused random watchdog resets, which would cause random crashes, reboots. The company got a settlement due to it to remediate it, but the MBA legal types deemed it too expensive to fix what was already in the field, so they fixed it in support. We had very strict talking points when our customers would report this issue. Everyone in the support team knew what the issue was and had each worked several cases of it. But our script made us act stupid, like it was a unique case that had never happened before. It is kind of hard to do that when you have replaced multiple units for the same customer in several weeks, but if you diverted from the talking points, you got counseled by management. This issue caused several very high-level outages issues at many of our customers. We knew why, and we were told to act dumb and bury it in process procedures, so we didn't take the hit on needing to replace the known faulty hardware. Story 8. I worked for a company that oversees and enforces self-regulation for one of the power grids in the United States. My job was to help secure it against cyber attacks and to help write the regulations that enforce those protections. I had panic attacks on Sunday nights because I knew at work the next morning we'd go over the list of everything not compliant and the lawyers would argue they were and nothing would get done. Many times the lawyers would tell me that I wasn't interpreting what was written correctly. Then I'd remind them that I wrote it with a committee, and if they didn't believe me, they could go look at the minutes taken in the meetings. Instead, they would just document their justifications for being compliant and not actually secure anything. The US power system is now so vulnerable to cyber attacks that it is only a matter of time before millions of people have their lives thrown into complete disaster and potentially hundreds of thousands that will die. I just can't even think about how bad things are now. Story 9. I worked for a very prominent sports broadcast. Hardcore fans would always get so angry when the broadcast was narrative focused, but the reality is that the majority of viewership metrics aren't that hardcore minority that are so extremely vocal on things like social media and Reddit that would complain about narratives, etc. Production meetings weekly were about key words and key narrative lines to essentially sell these teams and players to the audience over and over and over, because the majority of viewers only tune in for a moment or a game, so you gotta repeat it to make it stick. And it did work in terms of those narratives actually sticking and building player brands. So much was manufactured and about working together with broadcast and teams to build fandom. That is the #1 goal. Could we go massively in depth on a hardcore level? Yeah, and the talent team always wanted to, but production had the data and was like, the fandom immediately turns off when we do that. So I guess the dirty secret is, sports broadcasts, hardcore analytical fans are never the target demographic. Probably not a secret, but some sports fans really miss that. Story 10. There's a government in East Asia that was or still is running a low-key sterilization campaign in Central and Eastern Africa. They do it in partnership with a private company I used to work for. I was sworn in on the project in September 2013. I was with the company until late 2017 and had to sign an NDA that I wouldn't say anything. The NDA didn't specifically mention sterilization, but instead the methods used. The company I worked for with funding from this particular East Asian government set up free clinics in half a dozen or so African nations and offered free healthcare to the locals. Naturally, they went for it because they were getting much better quality of healthcare than they had ever gotten before. They were baited with the quality treatment and then sterilized without their knowledge. The methods used were non-surgical, and the company I worked for was given a quota of 30,000 to 50,000 sterilizations a year by the government funding the project. I don't know if they're still running the program, the company is still in business, but I don't know if they've still got the contract or if some competitor offered a better deal to that particular East Asian government. This is as far as I'm willing to go on the details.